buckle up, because today's deep dive is going to be a wild one.
Yeah, we're talking about a letter that's less Dear John and more like, Dear Emperor, you're going down.
Seriously, this thing is fiery. We're going back to the 4th century Roman Empire, folks.
4th century, you said? That's like togas and gladiators, right?
Well, more like togas and theological throwdowns.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Imagine getting a letter so savage, so full of biblical burns, that it could make a Roman emperor swag.
That's a lot of sweat. Okay, so who wrote this epic roast?
The author of this masterpiece is none other than Lucifer of Cagliari.
Lucifer! Like, that Lucifer.
Not quite the Prince of Darkness himself, but a bishop with a serious axe to grind.
Okay, a bishop named Lucifer writing to an emperor. This is already gold. But why? What's the beef?
Well, to understand that, we need to talk about the religious landscape back then. We're in the 4th century. Christianity is the official religion of the Roman Empire. You'd think things would be chill, right?
You'd think so, right? But no.
Wrong. Imagine this. Christianity goes from a persecuted sect to the empire's top religion, and suddenly everyone's got an opinion about what it means to be a true Christian.
Oh boy, I can see where this is going. Too many cooks in the kitchen always leads to drama.
Exactly. And in this case, the drama centers around the big man himself, Jesus Christ.
So what's the issue? Did someone forget to bring the frankincense to the manger?
Worse, they couldn't agree on who Jesus really was. Was he God? Was he man? Was he some kind of divine hybrid? This debate, my friend, was the talk of the ancient town.
Ah, the good old days when theological debates were all the rage.
And this is where our boy Lucifer enters the ring, ready to rumble. You see, the emperor at the time, Constantius II, he was leaning towards a view called Arianism.
Arianism. Remind me what that one was about again.
So Arians believed that Jesus was divine, sure, but he was created by God the Father, making him like a lesser deity.
Like a divine demotion. Sorry, Jesus, you're God, but not God.
Exactly. And Lucifer, well, he was having none of it. He was all about the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all equal, all divine, one big, happy, and very powerful family.
So not exactly a fan of the Arian playlist then, but like, it's just theology, right? Why write a whole angry letter to the emperor about it? Couldn't he just, I don't know, start a strongly worded blog?
Remember those biblical burns I mentioned? Lucifer wasn't just disagreeing with Constantius. He was going for the jugular, claiming that his support for Arianism was basically a one-way ticket to eternal damnation.
Okay, so maybe a little more intense than a blog post.
And here's where it gets really wild. Lucifer doesn't just use theological arguments, he goes full Old Testament, citing biblical badasses like Moses and Phineas.
Wait, Moses? As in parting the Red Sea, 10 Commandments, Moses?
The one and only. See, both Moses and this guy Phineas, they weren't afraid to use violence to punish those who strayed from God.
So Lucifer's saying Constantius should be punished violently.
It's more like, hey, if those guys could get away with it, why not take a page from their book?
Talk about awkward dinner conversation.
Right. But it shows how central the Old Testament was to their worldview. They saw these figures as role models, even when they were, smiting people in the name of God.
So for Lucifer, this wasn't just about theological hair-splitting. It was about the very fate of the Roman Empire, right?
Exactly. He believed that a ruler's faith directly impacted his ability to govern. And to Lucifer, Constantius was leading the empire down a very dangerous path.
And to really drive his point home, Lucifer throws in some Old Testament imagery that'll make your hair stand on end.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. It's like a Quentin Tarantino movie directed by Moses.
Okay, you're not exaggerating. He's got stoning, burning, even this gruesome bit about scattering ashes on graves.
Right. Like, what did those graves ever do to him?
Right.
But seriously, is this just shock value, or is he trying to scare Constantius straight?
It's a bit of both, I think. Remember, this is a world where the Bible was everything. History, law, moral compass.
So by using those graphic images, he's not just making a point. He's like transporting Constantius right into the heart of those brutal stories.
Exactly. He's saying, look, this is what happened to people who messed with God back then. Do you really want to risk it? It's fear as a persuasive tactic, something we unfortunately still see today.
Yeah, not exactly the best way to win an argument, but I guess you got to work with what you've got.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Lucifer doesn't just rely on scare tactics. He's got a whole arsenal of historical examples to back him up.
Oh, he's got receipts. He brings up King Josiah, this Old Testament ruler who went full-on iconoclast.
Iconoclast? Is that like some ancient Instagram influencer who smashes idols for likes?
Not quite, but close. Basically, Josiah went on a rampage, destroying idols and even going after the graves of those who worship them.
Okay, that's next level zeal right there. What's Lucifer's point in bringing him up?
He's presenting Josiah as the gold standard of religious leadership, the kind of ruler who's willing to go the extra mile to cleanse the land of false idols. It's a not-so-subtle hint to Constantius, like, step up your game, dude.
Talk about pressure. But wasn't Josiah, like, way back in the day? Why would Constantius even care?
Because Lucifer's crafting a narrative here. He's saying that history is on his side, that this is the way things have always been done, defend the faith, even if it means getting your hands dirty.
So not exactly a peaceful protest kind of guy. And then there's the Maccabean revolt, right?
Ah, yes, the OG Jewish freedom fighters. This is where Lucifer really flexes his storytelling muscles.
Okay, give me the SparkNotes version. What went down in the Maccabean revolt, and why is Lucifer bringing it up?
Imagine this. You're a Jew living under oppressive Greek rule. You're forced to abandon your traditions, your faith.
Yeah, not cool.
Exactly. So this family, the Maccabees, they'd had enough. They rise up, they fight back, they reclaim their religious freedom.
And they probably look super cool doing it,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
No.
Picture Braveheart, but with more sandals and less blue face paint. Anyway, Lucifer uses this story to paint himself as a kindred spirit, a defender of true faith against a tyrannical ruler.
So he's saying, hey, the Maccabees were heroes, and I'm just following in their footsteps. Clever, but a little manipulative, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. He's cherry-picking history to fit his narrative, but that's kind of his thing, right? He even brings up the prophet Elisha, who called out a king for, well, being a terrible king and persecuting God's people.
Didn't Elisha also have, like, bears mauled some kids who made fun of him?
That's the one. See, Lucifer even throws in that little detail just to remind Constantius that divine retribution is a real thing.
It's like a divine smackdown highlight reel.
Exactly. He wants Constantius and anyone else listening to know that this isn't just some philosophical debate. It's about cosmic good versus evil, and Lucifer, well, he's on the front lines.
So it's not just about Constantius's bad theology. It's about the fate of his very soul.
Exactly. He keeps throwing out these examples of biblical figures who face some serious consequences for their actions. Achan stoned for stealing, Amaziah killed for abandoning God. He's basically saying, don't tempt fate, Connie. This could be you.
It's like he's got a divine hit list,
Yeah.
and Constantius is on it.
And it's not just about individual punishment. Lucifer's turning up the heat, claiming that Constantius's actions could bring divine wrath down on the entire Roman Empire. Talk about playing the guilt card.
That's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Right. But remember, this was still a relatively new era for Christianity in Rome. There was this underlying fear that the empire's fate was tied to its spiritual health.
So, like, if the emperor sneezes, the empire gets the plague.
Pretty much. And Lucifer's playing on that fear masterfully.
Okay, so we've covered the Old Testament and the historical guilt trip. What about the New Testament? Surely Lucifer's got some material from there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting. One of the most fascinating comparisons he makes is between Constantius and a character named Bar-Jesus.
Bar-Jesus, that's a name that just screams, I'm up to no good.
Right. And he totally lives up to the name. So Bar-Jesus is this magician from the Book of Acts, and he's basically going around trying to discredit the apostles and turn people away from Christianity.
So like an ancient anti-Christian influencer.
Basically. And Lucifer's point in bringing him up is subtle but brilliant. He's saying, look, even this two-bit magician managed to cause problems for the apostles. Who are you, O mighty emperor, to think you're above scrutiny?
It's like he's taking Constantius down a peg or two by comparing him to this biblical nobody.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, he even throws in the part where Bar-Jesus is struck blind by God as punishment for his actions.
Subtle. So it's not just about correcting Constantius' theology, it's about this whole idea of divine punishment, right?
Absolutely. For Lucifer, punishment isn't just about revenge, it's about restoring order, purifying the faith, which, as you can imagine, is a concept that's been used to justify all sorts of messed up things throughout history.
Yeah, the whole punishing in the name of God thing rarely ends well.
Tell me about it. But we have to remember that for Lucifer and many others at the time, this wasn't just some abstract idea. They truly believed that straying from the true faith had eternal consequences.
So it's not just about earthly power struggles, it's about the fate of Constantius' immortal soul.
Exactly. He's tapping into that primal fear, the fear of eternal damnation. And for someone like Constantius, who probably grew up in a Christian household, that fear would have been deeply ingrained.
So Lucifer's not pulling any punches. He's hitting Constantius with everything he's got. Historical shaming, biblical threats, and the promise of eternal suffering.
It's the full religious guilt trip package. And this, my friend, is a classic hallmark of religious extremism.
You take a dash of fear, a sprinkle of cherry-pick history, and boom, you've got yourself a recipe for justifying all sorts of bad behavior.
And what's even more unnerving is that these tactics were already so effective back in the 4th century. It makes you wonder if things have really changed that much.
Speaking of not much changing, Lucifer's not done with his biblical name-dropping. He even brings up the Apostle Peter, the rock star apostle who performed miracles.
Yes. Peter, the original Miracle Max.
So what's Lucifer's angle here? Is he trying to get on Peter's good side, or is there something more to it?
Oh, it's way more strategic than that. By invoking Peter, Lucifer's drawing a direct line between himself and the apostles, presenting himself and his fellow bishops as their true successors.
So he's basically saying, we're carrying on Jesus' legacy here, folks. If you question us, you question the big guy upstairs.
Exactly. It's a power move, plain and simple. He's solidifying the church's authority in this newly Christianized Roman world.
So we're seeing how religion and politics get all tangled up, right? It's not just about faith anymore. It's about power, influence, control.
100%. And that's where things get really messy, really fast.
Especially when you throw violence into the mix, which unfortunately is exactly what Lucifer does.
Right. He doesn't shy away from that at all. In fact, he goes as far as to justify violence as a form of spiritual cleansing.
Wait, what? Like, violence is okay if it's in the name of God?
That's essentially his argument. He keeps going back to the Old Testament, citing all these instances where God supposedly ordered the Israelites to kill those who worshipped other gods or turned away from him.
So it's like a divine purge. You're out of line, you're out of here.
Pretty much. And while it's easy to look back and judge, we have to remember that this kind of thinking wasn't totally out there in the 4th century. The Roman Empire had a long and bloody history of using violence to maintain order.
So it's this toxic mix of Roman brutality and Christian righteousness.
It's like they took the thou shalt not kill commandment and added a bunch of loopholes.
Yeah, unless they worship the wrong God, wasn't exactly part of the original deal. But seriously, how do we even begin to process this? Lucifer's letter is like a historical car crash. You can't look away, but it's hard to stomach.
It definitely makes you think twice about those good old days people talk about, but I think that's why studying history is so important, even when it's uncomfortable.
So we don't repeat the same mistakes.
Exactly. Lucifer's letter might seem like ancient history, but the themes it touches on, intolerance, violence in the name of religion, political maneuvering within religious institutions, those are all still incredibly relevant today.
Sadly, some things never change. But how do we make sense of Lucifer's extreme views? Was he just a lone wolf, or were these ideas more widespread back then?
Well, he was definitely on the more, shall we say, passionate end of the spectrum. But he wasn't alone. There were other prominent figures in the early church who expressed similar views about the need to defend the faith, even if it meant resorting to violence.
So it wasn't just Lucifer being, well, Lucifer. These ideas had some real traction.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that we can't judge historical figures solely by modern standards. The 4th century was a very different world.
Different how? I mean, besides the lack of decent coffee.
Imagine this. Christianity goes from being outlawed, persecuted, to being the official religion of the Roman Empire practically overnight.
Talk about a glow-up.
Yeah.
But I can see how that kind of rapid change could lead to some growing pains.
Exactly. And those growing pains included figuring out how to navigate this new world order. They had to define what Christianity meant, not just as a persecuted faith, but as a powerful force in the empire.
And when you've got that much power up for grabs, things are bound to get messy.
You said it. And let's not forget the whole Arianism debate. This wasn't just some theological footnote. It was seen as a threat to the very core of Christian identity as they understood it.
So in their minds, they were fighting for their very survival.
In a way, yes. And that feeling, that sense of being under attack, can lead to some pretty extreme reactions, even violence.
Which is a terrifying thought. But it brings us to a really important question. How do we, as modern readers, approach a document like Lucifer's letter?
It's a tough one. On the one hand, we have this incredible historical document that gives us a glimpse into the minds of these early Christians. But on the other hand, it's full of ideas that are, frankly, horrifying to us today.
So how do you balance acknowledging the historical context without, accidentally endorsing these views?
That's the million-dollar question for historians. We have to be honest about the past, even the ugly parts, but we also have a responsibility to present it in a way that encourages critical thinking.
So giving people the tools to understand the past, but not telling them what to think about it.
Exactly. It's about having those difficult conversations, asking hard questions, and being willing to sit with the discomfort.
And maybe, just maybe, by understanding how these ideas took root in the past, we can prevent them from taking hold in the present.
Now you're talking. Because, let's be honest, the tactics Lucifer used in his letter, the fear-mongering, the historical cherry-picking, the appeals to authority, those haven't exactly gone out of style.
True that. It's like a greatest hits compilation of bad arguments.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to recognize those tactics, to call them out when we see them, and to have the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's unpopular.
Well said. Because, as we've learned from today's deep dive, the battle against intolerance and violence, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's one that requires constant vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to learn from the mistakes of the past. So until next time, keep asking those tough questions and stay curious, my friends.